Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Caught Looking podcast. I'm Lou Landers, usually joined by Dr. Roto. This week, though, I have a special guest joining me. He's filling in for the doc. I'm joined by a former co-host of mine on the Lucas Baseball podcast, a former writer at drroto.com as well. He's now at FTN doing some amazing work over there. Lucas Biery at Lucas Biery 33 on Twitter. Welcome to the Caught Looking podcast.
Excited to do this, man. Going old school here with our waiver wire talk and a little bit of early season observation, so it should be a good one.
Yeah, it's a classic reunion special show for you and I. So let's talk about some things going on around the league, whether it be good things, bad things. Let's call them disappointment, surprises. I know it's early. You know it's early, but there's always something to talk about in terms of MLB and fantasy baseball, overreactions, underreactions, or perfectly good reactions. So let's talk about the most disappointing hitter and pitcher so far in your mind. Who would your hitter be?
Yeah, so the hitter's actually going to be a guy that we have in multiple fantasy leagues that we co-own together, and it's going to be Francisco Lindor for me. I have zero concerns for Lindor, but 59 plate appearances so far. He's just a 98 average. He's just been dreadful, but it really doesn't matter, and he's going to wake up soon.
Yeah, it hasn't been very good for him. You're right. And I think he's one of those guys that really people are just kind of giving up on him in a sense. Not that they're going to drop him, but they're just okay, he's finished and the league's figured him out. People are just so quick to overreact sometimes, man, and it just boggles the mind. It's not like he's like a 2-year veteran, right?
No, and he's had fold down seasons too, where for his normal standard, his first year with the Mets, 20 home runs, 10 steals, 230 average with 73 runs and 63 RBIs. I mean, that is a down year for your fantasy investment, but he came back to normal the next year, and he's a very high volume player, so no concerns.
Yeah, he's got plenty of time to bounce back from a slow start, as does anyone who started slow. So my disappointing hitter, and I kind of thought you were going to mention him because you started saying we rostered him in a league together. It's Victor Scott. And when he got called up, it was because of Carlson's injury, right? There was tons of buzz. Oh, he's going to have this big time stolen bases. And it's possible that he could do that, but you have to get on base first in order for the stolen bases to mean something. He's batting .091, 163 on base percentage, struck out 12 times in 13 games. And I think when the Cardinals activate Carlson, Scott's going back to the minors. So it's definitely a big disappointment.
Yeah, I agree. I think he'll be heading back to the minors as well. Last year was his first year ever above high A, and he only had 310 plate appearances at AA, 66 games. So he never even reached the AAA level. He just turned 23 2 months ago. So it's not like this is a guy that had loads of upper level experience. So, a struggle from him. We had high hopes, but not the most shocking thing, I guess. But I hear you.
Certainly so. So let's move over to the mound. If there's a pitcher out there, who would you say is the most disappointing to you?
Well, I went with a little bit of a different approach, but I say the most disappointing thing is all the injuries, whether it's the best two starters in the game, Garrett Cole and Spencer Strider, or whether it's a litany of other guys. No one wants to see this. And you might fade a player in fantasy because there's injury risk, but whenever you see that go across the ticker that a guy's out, it's a terrible feeling no matter what. And there's been a lot of talk as far as what baseball can do to reduce these injuries, but no matter what, the constant is that this is just terrible.
Couldn't agree with you more on it being terrible, and it just blows just keep coming. It really is. It really is awful. So I wasn't as creative as you. I actually came up with a player, and for me, it's going to be George Kirby. Thinking about how early he was being drafted this draft season, and I know I'm confident he'll turn things around, but he's got to be considered a huge disappointment, man. His first start of the season, great. Past two, though, yikes. 7 2/3 innings only, 18 hits allowed, and 13 earned runs allowed. It has not been pretty for Mr. Kirby.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have Kirby in two of my leagues, and with these huge blowups, I mean, they're on your ledger and they're not going to just vanish. So you're going to have to deal with that. It's going to be hard for him to get below a 3.3 ERA like he flirted with the prior 2 years. Just kind of reminded me whenever you have a guy that's not a high elite strikeout guy, if those ratios aren't perfect and you're usually buying those ratios off a career year, they're a little finicky. Just even the best ratio guys can just have a little bit of bad luck here or there. The K's, that's why we chase them, because they're more stable and secure.
They definitely are. That's a good point. So there's been some surprisingly good teams, some disappointing teams. Let's start with the disappointing team. I think we're probably going to be on the same page here. The Houston Astros.
Yes, that's what I had listed for my team as well. But I have another one that we can bring up too if you want to go with the Astros first.
All right. I mean, you look at the Astros, they're sitting in last place in their division, keeping in mind this division also has the Oakland A's. So that is a little scary. Of course, it's super early, but the starting pitching, it's been a disaster for them. And that's with them getting surprise gems from Ronald Blanco as well. So that's even more wild if you think about it like that. I'm very confident they'll turn things around, especially they have a very good lineup. But at this point, there cannot be a team that's more disappointing than the Astros in the early going.
Yep, completely agree. And in our MLB wins pool, I took the Astros with a lot of happiness and good feelings and value, and not panning out. You had the Mets last year, and they were poised to be a super team. And, it just goes to show you, I don't think the Astros are going to guaranteed miss the playoffs, but unless they can get their big starting pitchers back soon, it's going to be a long year. Let me tell you that.
It definitely will be because as much as you can hit, you're still going to need to pitch, especially in a division with a team like Texas. And of course, although they haven't started so great, the Mariners will turn things around. Their pitching is too good, and their lineup will start to hit. And the Angels at least appear to be adequate.
Absolutely.
All right. So
we could go about my other team if you wanted to.
Oh, yeah, sure, man. Let's hear it.
So, kind of going back to you, you had like bad luck in your MLB wins pool that we're both in together this year. My second team's having bad luck as well with the Minnesota Twins being 4-6, fourth place in the AL Central. I expected to see a better record from them. Granted, it's been 10 games. I'm not worried, but a surprise, I guess.
It's definitely surprising, and I don't think you can say it's only because of a guy like Royce Lewis getting hurt. I mean, they're a team that should be built for more than just that. But again, super early. The only difference is that it does seem like the teams around them are a little better. And I'm saying that as I'm moving over to some of these surprise teams so far. And I want to start in the AL Central because it's wide open. Other than the White Sox, the other four teams certainly in contention. Tigers started well, fallen off, though. The Twins, you just mentioned, but the Guardians and Royals, pleasant surprises so far. The Royals, only thing that's not going right for them is Will Smith. The rest of the bullpen seems to figure things out. Royals playing excellent baseball. Lineup is much improved from a year ago. Starting rotation is too, with Brady Singer pitching well, Waka and Lugo in there behind Cole Ragans. I think they're a legitimate contender in the division. Of course, health is important. They are going to need to make some moves for bullpen arms at some point later in the year, but they've won 7 straight games, look to make it 8 tonight, lead the American League in runs scored. So pretty crazy stuff from the Kansas City Royals. I'd like to get your take on them, and if you have a take maybe on the Guardians, who I know is another pretty surprising team.
Yeah, the Royals were my team that I had listed. I'm very surprised because usually they've been a team that's been poor the last few years, like 65 wins or so, it seems like off the top of my head. And I thought that adding the veteran arms that they brought in, they were nice stabilizing SP4 types, like a Seth Lugo or a Brady Singer. But or a Michael Walker, excuse me. I didn't think that those big pitchers would just make them that much better. I thought they would be a solid upgrade to get them into the low 70s for wins. So I didn't think that they would have a chance at the playoffs because their offense seems to me like it has some holes. But hey, if Michael Garcia becomes a big time player and they can get a lot of production out of MJ Melendez, the lineup does lengthen some.
Yeah, and Vinny Pasquantino also,
Yes.
if he is back from his injury, it's definitely a much nicer looking lineup than we've seen in the past. Even in addition, like a Hunter Renfroe can kind of
Yeah.
fly under the radar. If he signs with a team like a big name team, you're like, what are they going to do with him? But for a team like the Royals, Hunter Renfroe doesn't look too bad hitting in the bottom third of that lineup.
Yes, and a guy like Bobby Witt Jr., we shouldn't fail to mention that he has MVP upside this season.
He certainly does. He's off to a ridiculously awesome start as well.
Now on Cleveland, they've actually disappointed me the last few years because they were a playoff team a few years ago. And if you look at the core of the team, it's not that much different. The problem that they've been dealing with is that their frontline starters just haven't given them the innings they were hoping for, like Shane Bieber and Tristan McKenzie over the years. And of course, they traded away Aaron Savale, so that kind of nipped away at their depth. But if you look at the core of the roster, with Jose Ramirez, Josh Naylor, Bo Naylor's one of the better hitting catchers in the American League, they have a decent roster. It's just been hitting on those fringe guys and avoiding too many dreadful starters that they've had to put out there with their injuries. But yeah, I consider them closer to a 500 team than the Royals heading into the year. But yeah, they've had a nice little start too.
Yeah, I expected the Guardians to be reasonably good this year.
Yeah.
But what's surprising is that they're doing it with offense, not with pitching.
Yeah.
Because you think of the Guardians and you think of pitching. But Bieber done for the year. BB hasn't been good. Williams hasn't even pitched yet. And they're a 9-3 team, second best record in the AL, leading the AL in runs per game, although the Royals lead the AL in runs total. And at some point, they could promote a guy like Kyle Manzardo or Chase DeLauter, and that would only further bolster this lineup. Is it possible that the Guardians become a playoff caliber team this season because of their lineup?
Man, that's tough. I would say that they'd have to have good pitching in addition to it. I know you probably think that too, but I think that for them to win the division and or the Royals, I think that the Twins have to really fizzle out. I don't think that the Twins can be pretty decent and one of these teams also win the division. I think the Twins would have to take a significant step back.
Good point there. Good point for sure. Honorable mention, Pittsburgh Pirates, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any other honorable mentions right now?
I guess, and I'm not one of these people that thought the Dodgers would win, 120 games or anything guaranteed. But seeing them at 10-5, maybe you would have thought like a little bit of a better record, I guess.
That's fair. It's funny though, because when the team is doing okay and like 10-5 or whatever, you're like, oh, it's early. I mean, if you look 20 games from now, they might go 15-5 in their next 20 and it looks better. But then you see a team like the Astros and you say, yeah, it's early, but if they don't turn things around in another 2 weeks or so, it starts to get late early, if that makes sense.
Oh, it does, because I remember the St. Louis Cardinals start last year when they were a supposed playoff team, and people were thinking, oh, they have to win, 70% of their games from, this date forward. It's like, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Well,
they do.
look
They
at
do
the
need to avoid that.
Marlins. The Marlins are what, 2-11 or something? I mean, like, I don't want to say there's no way, but there's no way. Like, I don't think they're winning a playoff berth, even with the 2-11 start. It's not like it's a 3-30 start. That would be insane.
Uh-huh.
But 2-11, it's hard to come back from that, especially in a pretty good division.
Yes, it is going to be tough to come back from that, and I think that's where you could easily see, for fantasy purposes, a guy like Tanner Scott get moved, a guy like Anthony Bender move up into that closer role sooner than later, or maybe even one of their starters like Jesus Luzardo or Trevor Rogers could get shipped off because their general manager, Peter Bennick's coming over from the Tampa Bay Rays. He's going to cash out any assets that have value because he knows that this team is in a multi-year rebuild.
It seems that way for sure. They were a surprising team last year, qualifying for the postseason. Don't see it happening again. So, over from the teams to maybe some players. Do you have any hitters or pitchers you want to throw out there as players who surprised you?
Yes, so my pitcher who's been a slight surprise for me is Ranger Suarez. He's been phenomenal this year. Um, he's made 3 starts. He's been able to qualify for a win in each of them. He's got a 30% strikeout rate this year and a career best 4.8% walk rate. Obviously, those numbers don't mean much because it's only 3 starts, but it's well over a strikeout per inning, and guy pitches for a very quality team. His fastball velocity isn't up, and his swing and miss isn't that much up. So I think that he's not necessarily a different guy or anything, but sometimes in fantasy, even if a guy is 27, 28, 29 and kind of establish who they are, if they get good luck with wins or maybe just get a few more extra strikeouts, they can be upside in guys who aren't, first, second, third year players.
That's fair. That's actually a very good point. And I do have some Suarez shares. I did not start him against the Braves, but I have in the other starts, and I've been happy. So I have 3 guys that have stood out to me so far. Ronald Blanco, of course. He's got 2 of the 4 wins the Astros have, one with a no-hitter and then one with 6 innings, one-hit baseball against the defending world champion. So that's pretty crazy. Tanner Houck, maybe we chalk up some of the success to the A's and Angels being the opponents, but first 2 starts of the year, 6 innings in both starts, wins in both starts, 17 Ks to just 2 walks. So that's pretty cool. And then Jordan Hicks.
Mm.
And I'm the first to say I was not confident at all. I had no confidence in Hicks being able to be a competent or durable starting pitcher coming into the season. So far he's really proved me wrong. And I do have the shares because he was available late in drafts. Awesome stuff. 3 starts, 2 wins, only 2 earned runs allowed in 18 innings. I'm still not confident that it lasts, but I will say I've been wrong on him so far, and he's been a nice surprise.
Yes. Yeah, I've been shocked on Hicks too. That's a really good mention. Um, yeah, his metrics, 89% left on base rate. League average is like 72%. So he's stranding basically all the runners possible. His BABIP is 229, which is insanely low. His swing and miss and his called strikes plus whiffs is very low too compared to his career norms. Granted, you're looking at it compared to a bullpen arm, so they're going to come down as a starter. But I'm very curious to see how long this continues with Hicks, since we have him on our shared dynasty roster as a SP flyer.
Well, the longer it can last, the better for sure, especially with our boy Framberg going down. So, maybe Hicks will be our Framber this year. Crossing my fingers. I doubt it, but anything's possible. So let's move things over to a very important fantasy baseball topic.
We got our surprising hitters to do too.
Oh yeah, we do. I just got so excited about FAAB because I saw some news about Yariel Rodriguez, and I'm excited to talk about him potentially. But hitting wise, you are right. Who do you got? Who's surprising you?
Well, I've got 2 quick guys. One is a little bit more straightforward. Tyler O'Neill is a huge surprise for me. Before 2021, he had really never had a sustained run of much success really. And after 2021, he was somewhat successful in limited stints, but he was never over a league average hitter. And this year, he's been absolutely ridiculous. 6 big home runs, 232 WRC plus. So yeah, he's very much shocked me because obviously he has health issues, but his performance has been absolutely ridiculous this year.
It definitely has, and he was going to be my guy as well. And the only thing I'm going to add to it, Lucas, is 9 home runs all of last season, batted 231 with a 312 on base percentage. He already has 6 home runs this season, and it's been 11 games, batting over 300, 400 or more on base percentage. I would say that it's about a complete 180 from last season to this season.
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
Also, honorable mention for me, Stephen Kwan.
Yeah, he's hit a lot more home runs than I expected.
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah. He's always been a solid hitter, but the power has not necessarily been there. He leads Major League Baseball right now in hits and second in the AL in both runs and batting average. I certainly didn't expect that from him.
Oh, absolutely. Now my next kind of bat here that's been a shock for me is Spencer Steer. With him, I just saw a lot of problems. Just didn't really hit the ball that hard. His steals was limited upside as far as his steals go. I would have thought, 10 steals would be an absolute limited ceiling for him. And I just didn't think he was that great of a hitter. But he's shown that he's pretty decent. And with the injuries that they've suffered, his security is a lot more. He has a lot more security now. The thing that I kind of forgot that I need to remind myself, Lou, is obviously Great American Ballpark is going to fix a lot of issues. It's basically like Coors Field, where even back in the day, you'd have a guy like a Mark Reynolds or a Gerardo Parra. These are not good players, but Coors Field makes them good enough in fantasy. So I think that with Cincinnati guys, I need to lower the threshold as far as their skills for them to be good, because that park is ridiculous.
It definitely helps a lot. So good point there on him. So over to FAAB and waivers. And it's really not always just about who you pick up or drop, Lucas, but also about how much you end up spending on them. And this week, there's not so many obvious names necessarily. There are some that I think won't come as a shock, but I also think there are some guys who maybe you could sneak through this week rather than having to maybe overspend on them in a week or two. So we'll get to all of them. First guy I want to ask you about, though, is Jesus Sanchez of the Miami Marlins.
Yeah, so Sanchez surprisingly has actually flashed some stolen bases, which is typically not part of his game, but it is promising to see him running early. He's already tied his career high in steals this year with 3 steals. But this is typically a big power bat. Career barrel rate of 12% is fantastic for a waiver wire pickup. He does sit against left-handed arms, and you'll also want him out of your lineup against lefties, so you'll have to plan around that platoon. But I think this is a guy with 20-plus home run upside, and maybe he can steal you 10-plus bags as well. That is a very valuable player off waivers.
Definitely could be. Outfielder Colton Cowser of the Baltimore Orioles. I think this is going to be probably the biggest and highest bid on hitter of the week. What do you say?
Yes, I completely agree. He actually was floating out there in a lot of leagues last week, and he didn't go for that much because his playing time was not quite fully solidified yet. But it seems like the Baltimore Orioles have decided to change out Austin Hayes as their full-time regular and putting him into a short-side platoon role for Colton Cowser. And Cowser last year, folks remember, he was a fantastic prospect. Not quite top 5, maybe not even top 10, but certainly top 20 on most lists. And he had a skill set with some power and some speed, a little bit of platoon risk being a lefty, but an all-around kind of guy. He's entering into an elite lineup, and I think he's a priority ad in all formats.
He definitely should be, and it's definitely safe to say now that Austin Hayes is no longer the starting left fielder for the Baltimore Orioles. Colton Cowser has taken that job from him, and at some point, I wouldn't even be surprised to see Cowser get some opportunities against lefties because Hayes hasn't hit all that well against lefties either. So if Cowser can even be adequate against lefties, he might find himself in the lineup even more regularly, which would be nice, of course. But this week alone, he's been awesome. And yes, great lineup. Of course, I just called up Jackson Holiday to add to that lineup as well. Really good, fun, exciting young Orioles team. And Cowser, big part of that. Third baseman Junior Caminero, Tampa Bay Rays, Lucas. It's almost that time in April where teams can call up those prospects to gain an extra year of control. And he's not just the Rays' best prospect, but now with Holiday being promoted, it's probably fair to say that he's the best prospect in the minor leagues right now, certainly offensively. And Rays aren't off to a very good start. So a promotion could come sometime this week or the week after. It would seem fairly logical. And as you and I have talked about many times on our Lucas Baseball podcast in the past, once a guy is announced that he's being promoted, you're going to have to end up spending like 200 or 300 FAAB on a guy like that.
Oof.
If you do it this Sunday, before he's promoted, assuming he's not promoted by then, you can avoid a bidding war.
Yeah, you certainly can. Um, Caminero was dropped in some leagues because he had a quadriceps issue, but it actually seems like that is going okay. He's supposedly going to be reporting back by this weekend. Brandon Lau also got injured with an oblique issue, and he's had a litany of injuries over his career, unfortunately. So that could potentially open up some things. With Isak Paredes being a fantastic defender at third base and a big power bat himself, I did think that there was a little bit of a logjam for the Rays, but ultimately this offense is not the same now that they no longer have Wander Franco. So I thought that Caminero would be called up sooner than later. But like I said, that fit was tricky. With the second base being opened up, I think you could see Paredes slide over there. He's played the position before. But again, it's going to be a tricky fit. I would just try to be ahead of everything to get Caminero. He's one of the best hitting prospects in the game, bar none. And like you said, he's the best prospect in the minor leagues.
Great, good stuff. Over to some arms. Aroldis Chapman. So we know Bednar was injured during the spring. He wasn't used in a save situation during the first week of the season, and his most recent outing was a disaster. He got hammered. So it's possible something's not right with it. And that certainly could open the door for Aroldis Chapman to rack up saves. He does have one on the season. I think many more could be incoming. If he's out there, if it's FAAB, how much would you feel comfortable spending?
We're talking 15 or 12, Lou?
15 team.
15 team. I would say $50 at least. Maybe
That's your comfort level, or that's what you would spend? Like, you think you can actually get him for 50? Do you feel confident getting him for 50, or is that just your personal comfort level? Because of course the two are not the same necessarily.
I would say about 40 to 70. And the reasoning behind that is there is a chance that Bednar is compromised injury wise. He started out the season late. He only made 2 spring training appearances, which is not good. You should have more than that. But yeah, Aroldis Chapman, even if he is only getting saves, once every 7 to 10 days for this team when Bednar needs a day off, he provides enough strikeouts where I think in a 15-team league he's startable, and you get the bonus of he could potentially be traded later on in the season if the Pirates were to fall out of it. Now that's a long ways away. That'll be a very long hold for a middle reliever, but I think he has value even if Bednar is the closer. So that's why my number's quite high for the Hall of Famer.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. And what Doc and I typically talk about on these podcasts is if you're going to be spending more than like your, 8, 12, 20, you want to be bidding on a guy who you think can help you the entire season and not just for a short period of time. And Chapman does have that potential to do that. So that's a very good point. I'm with you on that. How
I
about,
think I think that with pitching being decimated so badly, and I know that this is exactly your process, Lou, is I think rolling out these middle relievers is not a bad call. If you can get between 3 to 5, 6+ strikeouts a week from these middle relievers, that's basically just as much as you would get from a back end starter. So yeah.
yeah, certainly early on, I'm with you. So Rodriguez, I mentioned him earlier, the Toronto Blue Jays. Do you have any thoughts on him? Do you think he's going to get into the rotation because of the struggles from Francis? Do you think they're calling him up to throw him into the bullpen? What do you think the Blue Jays' plan is with this kid upon his arrival?
Yeah, so Yariel Rodriguez is a very interesting player. He came over from Cuba, signed in the offseason as a free agent with the Blue Jays for a 5-year, $32 million deal, a decent sized investment for an unknown. Some similarities in my mind to a guy like Nick Martinez, who sometimes started, sometimes he went 4 innings, sometimes he came in out of the bullpen. Yariel Rodriguez has an elite 70 grade slider and a solid 60 grade fastball, but outside of that, none of his pitches really have popped from what I can tell. So I think he could be a 2 to 3 inning guy, maybe 4 innings. Give him 2 times through the lineup. I don't think they're going to put an opener in front of him, but I don't think he's your traditional 5 inning type starter. But he could be a valuable player for a team that needs more pitching.
Yeah, potentially the strikeouts too. So one more guy I want to ask you about, John Means from the Orioles. He was not very good in his first rehab appearance, but he should probably make another two, maybe even three, and could be called up at some point during the week that runs from the 25th to the 21st of April. Again, one of those guys you want to pick up maybe a week early so you don't have to spend as much on him the week that he is promoted.
Yes, yeah, in a 15-team league, he should be owned by someone in your league, no matter what, whether there's an IL or not. He is going to be a nice two-start option when he draws those 2 starts, or whenever he gets a weak matchup at home. He's not a strikeout pitcher, but he is a good control pitcher, which means he's going to have a good whip typically, and he's going to have an elite chance at wins with the potent Blue Jays offense or Baltimore offense and an excellent bullpen. I don't think he's an upside player. I think he's a matchup guy with an okay floor, just because his velocity is low and he doesn't get much strikeouts, but he's a solid little arm that you can use in certain places.
Good stuff there. Anyone else that stands out for you? Any notes you want to share with all the viewers?
I would just say to just be very patient. Um, don't really make too big of assessments right away. Obviously, you're going to have to make decisions on certain players, whether a guy's struggling like a Parker Meadows or a guy that you thought would get more playing time just isn't. You're going to have to make those types of decisions. But with your first like 15 round picks, I would just stay the course with them and wouldn't make any drastic moves.
All right. Thank you very much for that. And Lucas, thank you so much for joining me here today and filling in for the doctor himself. A pleasure as always, a fun little reunion for us. Of course, tell everyone where they can follow you on Twitter, all the awesome work you do around the fantasy baseball industry.
Yeah, so you can follow me on Twitter at Lucas Biery 33. Fantasy baseball info there, and you can find my articles over on ftn.com. I do a weekly hitter preview / primer over there every week.
Check all that stuff out. Lucas Biery. And I'm Lou Landers. That'll wrap things up for us today. We'll be back next Friday, 12 p.m. Eastern, with myself and Dr. Roto. Of course, check out drroto.com for all our seasonal betting and DFS content. Until then, as Doc would say, be well and take care.